So here you see I'm starting with just basic primary colors. White to tint and to add the lighter shades. You've got red, magenta, and cyan. There I'm mixing cyan and white because that's a good base color for your sky. I also add primary blue, red, and yellow to my palette. And so here you see me just adding these colors because you have to remember that adding a color's complement will neutralize it, make it more gray, desaturate, neutralize the color, and go from there. So I find kind of a good shade of a darkish blue and I begin to add it to the sky. I start at the top and I work my way down, making it lighter as I go down. With this paint, I find, especially if it's been sitting in the cartons for a while, it gets thick, so add some water and that will make it more fluid. I like to work the whole length of the sky at one time, so I'm making large brush strokes and I'm blending from one side of the page to the next. As I do that, I realize that the darkness kind of dissipates a little bit at the top, and so go back in, add some more of the pure color right on top, and that can darken it. Then I go into the horizon line and add just straight white to really brighten it up a little bit. I want to show where my mountains are, and so I actually do some of the mid mountains first just so I can see where they're going to be, and then I go back and add them in. So right here I made an orange and I'm going to mix my yellow and my orange together to make that neutral that I was talking about, because that's going to make a nicer gray. Add white to it always. And then here is where I'm putting in the mountains where I was talking about, kind of those mid-level mountains. Even though there are mountains that are farther off in the distance, I wanted to get this one placed just so I knew where it was. Now I'm going into that color that I neutralized, that very, very, very light gray color that I mixed from orange and blue. And I'm just doing different, basically think of it like a value scale, but with your mountains. So I'm starting light, and I add a little bit more of the pigment to that light color that I mixed. And each time I add a little bit more pigment, until I, bring the mountains towards the viewer a little bit more. The paint can gather up in the bristles, and so if you notice, I will often spin my paintbrush to help get some of that pigment out of the bristles a little bit. So now I'm going back into these mountains. I'm not trying to be super precise and super neat. In the image that I was following, there was a bit of fog that kind of spilled in between those far background mountains and the foreground mountains, and so you see me add that in as well. Right here, it required a little bit more white just based off the photograph. So as I move forward, I'm adding more of that pure pigment to the lightish color that I've mixed, and so I'm mixing cyan and that primary cool blue together to make a darker kind of blue. I'm also neutralizing it by bits of orange. So you can see here it turns a little greenish. That's because I've added more yellow to it. And sometimes I like to mix right on my paper, and so that's what you see here is I've thrown yellow. Haven't cleaned my brush, just thrown the yellow right on there, and I've mixed all of that in with it as well. Add a little bit of water so I can really stretch this color out. Even though I'm going to end up painting over this, painting is layers. It takes layers. And so I'd rather have a base color that's not exactly 100% right, but I'd rather have it covering my entire surface. And so as it stands now, my foreground is still kind of muddy. It's closer to us, so it needs more detail. And so the next step is to go in and to darken it, because the rule of atmospheric perspective is that things that are closer to you are going to be darker, and things that are farther away are going to get lighter and have less detail. So what you see here is just me darkening this front mountain, and the next step is detail.